Smell like gigs, listening to the Night Flight show. Hatman strikes back. You know them ones.
Nobody can cross it. No, nobody can cross it. Nobody can cross it. Only who can manage the water. Nobody can cross it. No, nobody can cross it. Nobody can cross it. It's a fisherman and a fisherwoman. Nobody can cross it. No, nobody can cross it. Only who can manage the water unless we along to help them. The boss can swim. Believe it or not, the boss can swim. Yo, what's up, people? Always like to start with a song. In fact, let's start with a couple songs, because this is one of the greatest songs of its type. I'm sure most of you guys know this song. If you don't, look it up. It's called Nobody Can Cross It. This came out, when was it? You know, it's one of them songs where people used to get clips from news interviews and turn it into a track and it go viral. This was one of the funniest ones. There was also this one here. Who remembers this one? Dead giveaway. This guy looking like buckwheat. Who remembers this one? Dead giveaway. My neighbors got big testicles because we see this dude every day. We ate ribs with this dude and we didn't have a clue that the girl was in that house. She said, please help me get out. Yo, the golden age of YouTube. When these songs were coming out. Dead giveaway. Yo, what's happening, chat? In a silly mood tonight, you know. What's happening? Let's get a roll call here. All right, got Austin Spears. We got Ortega NJ, Striker, Andrew. My comment will trigger you. Possibly on the P's. We got Aku, we got MT. We got Shadab, excuse me. Frederick Anthony, Greg, Benny Stacks, Martin Wood Wilkinson, Dominic A, Marlo, he's baffed. That's right, Shadab, the landlord.
Yeah, man, like gigs.
Ortega says straight from Nam. That's right.
The landlord.
We got Dragon in the house. We got JDM. What else we got here? TC, Sparrowless, Jimbo. We got Warts, Y, Shane, Big Up, Jay's Creps, loving the dub. Yes. So, we'll talk about whatever you guys want. Shout out to Paul McAllister in the chat. Big up. So somebody asked, who should Dillian Whyte fight? Dillian Whyte is fighting, when is it? Next weekend on the Wardley undercard, and he's surely just going to take on a pie because Dillian Whyte is shot, and I'm pretty sure he knows he's shot, and therefore he's not going to take any kind of risk at all if he still thinks he can get a big cash out fight against AJ. And I think that's what he's waiting for, to see if this deal that AJ is supposedly trying to work out with Turki Al-Sheikh actually gets done. If it does get done, then yeah, don't be surprised if we see Dillian Whyte finally taking on Anthony Joshua. What is it now? A couple years after the previous fight fell through, or 18 months, whatever it was, when Dillian Whyte failed that test. Time flies. Should rematch Tete. Might as well, innit? Since they need a opponent at short notice, might as well rematch Tete. Lehman Chain says Tete. Okay, he's saying Tete should get a rematch. Mr. Bean says Dave Allen will beat him now, I think. Well, I watch Dave Allen's channel, you know, every now and then, and one of his recent videos, he was actually talking about who he'd like next. And he basically said he's got no interest in fighting Dillian Whyte again. That's literally what he said. He said he's got no interest in fighting Dillian Whyte again. He's got no interest in fighting Fraser Clark again. He said he wants a couple easy fights for his next two with Matchroom, unless they can get him the Deontay Wilder fight. That's what he said. Liam says Dave Allen contradicts himself as much as Carl Froch, to be fair. Yeah, he may well do. Kane says, watch the full Pastor Semper interview yesterday. And speaking of Pastor Semper, there you go. Look at that. You read my mind. Look what's on screen. You literally read my mind. The greatest interview in television history, debate, should I say, the greatest television debate in history, in human history, is the Pastor Semper Pepe Julian Onzima interview. That's right, the gay rights activist. Should I call you Mr.? Yeah, it's so funny and it's so like over the top. You'd think it was satire, but it's not satire. This is how a lot of television is in Uganda. It's just outrageous. If only we had TV shows like that. Where debates were as crazy as this. Ed says, how have I never seen this interview? It's on YouTube, man. Check it out. Go watch Paul Sachs documentary if you want some comedy gold. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Paul Sachs documentary. It is funny. Where he's talking about, bashing up sharks. Yeah, let me try to do a Paul Sachs impression. I'm a wonderful citizen. That's how he talks in it. I'm a wonderful citizen, me. They give me this council. Give me this house council. I'm trying to recall some of the stuff he says in that interview. Yo, clip him round ear roll. Clip him. Yeah, that's right. I know what to do with sharks. I know what to do with sharks. I know what to do with sharks. Clip him round ear roll. Yeah. They have my passport in Changi, Nick. What did he say? Changi police station. Got my passport there. I'm the only man in the history of mankind to swim across the Straits of Johor. Yeah, swam it. Only problem is sharks. Not shark infested, but the locals don't go paddling. Yeah, I know about the Paul Sachs interview, trust me. Fee Khabib says, has Hatman ever frequented Yorkshire? I have been to Yorkshire, yeah. I've been to Hull, I've been to Leeds, I've been to Huddersfield, Sheffield. Yeah, I've been to Yorkshire. That's right, yeah, that's the wedding scene. When Paul Sachs is there with Delroy Showers. Yeah. She slung a lot in with me. When he's saying all that. Yeah. She slung a lot in with me. Them old school northern guys were so funny. You probably wouldn't have wanted to be around them, but hilarious. Yeah, I've been to Glasgow, I've been to Edinburgh, I've been to Aberdeen. I've been all over the UK. I've been to Blackpool, I've been to Preston, Manchester, obviously, Bristol. Have I ever visited Bath? I haven't visited Bath. No, I haven't visited Bath, but I've been to many other places. Yeah, it's crazy when Semper gets out the vegetables. He starts talking about, this is Bokaya, Matoke, and all this business. It's been a few years now, our Fee Khabib. A few years now. Jay Silver says Bath right next to Bristol. Yeah, I know it's not far. I remember we visited Bristol when we were, like me and my brothers, when we were still kids. Maybe about, I don't know, 10 years old, 11 years old. And you know what you like as kids? You can make friends easy as kids. So we were in Bristol and we went round the corner, me and one of my brothers maybe, or both my brothers. And there was some little park or whatever it was. And there was kids playing football. So you know what it's like when you're kids, you just join in a football game, innit? They saw us and they were like, yeah, what's up? And whatever, we started playing football with them. And we could not for the life of us understand what they were saying. The first time here in the Bristol, remember, we're just coming from the Caribbean a couple years earlier. And we could not understand what these Bristol kids were saying. Because obviously when you're running around playing football, people are shouting things like, and they kept saying, purse it, purse it, purse it. I was like, what? Oh, you mean pass it? I was like, wow, this is the craziest accent I've ever heard. Afro Gem says you went to St. Paul's Carnival. Nah. I can't remember what the reason was that we went to Bristol. Our parents had a friend there or something. It's a very long time ago. But yeah, we ended up going there. Desi says, who you think would have won Prime Sonny Liston versus Prime George Foreman? God, that's a very tough fight. I might even lean towards Liston. I think he was a bit better boxer. But it's a real close one. Full Fox says, yo, Hatman, have you ever been to Japan? Moved there 2017 and it's the best thing I've done. Getting out of the UK now, self-employed translator. Love your content, man. Best wishes. Big up. No, I've never been to Japan. I do want to go to the Far East, but actually from where I am, might not take that long to get to Japan. But one of the things that always kind of put me off was just how far the travel was. From the UK to get to Japan. It is a mission. Encircled says, I don't think he's underrated. It's just the era. He's talking about Sonny Liston. It's just the era was a little weak and his run was extremely short. Yeah, he did have a short run. But the thing about Liston is he beat a lot of good fighters before he became champion. Like a lot of good fighters of the era. Again, not that the era was amazingly strong, but he did beat a lot of the guys before his title run. Do you know what I mean? Grown Man Travel says, Japan is incredible. I went last year and going to China this year. Jay Silva says, worst area I've been to in the UK is Bradford. I've been to Bradford, but way back in the days. I only went to Bradford once, I think. So I couldn't even remember what it was like. I just remember there was loads of Asian people even then. But other than that, I couldn't tell you much about Bradford. Possibly on the piece says, the mix of Jamaican and Bristol accents works well. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about the UK is how diverse the accents are, considering the fact that it's a relatively small country geographically, but the accents differ so much. Henry says, I once got robbed in Brixton. Sorry to hear that. Phil says, as an Australian casual boxing fan, is Bakoli a hype job? Is he the boogeyman of the division? Are other fighters avoiding him? And did he drop everyone in sparring? Well, I don't really tend to use terms like hype job because I think it's overused and it gets, it loses its meaning. With most fighters, you can't really categorize them as the real deal or a hype job. It's more like shades of grey. So I wouldn't call Martin Bakoli a hype job at all. I would say he's a good fighter, but he's obviously got limitations and he seriously lacks discipline. And it's also possible, by the way, that Martin Bakoli's already peaked. Fighters peak at different ages. And this is a conversation I was having with someone or a couple of people. In fact, I think Ocean Blue, shout out to Ocean Blue who's in the chat. A couple of people in my Element group. I think TG was another one who was having this discussion regarding Moses Itauma, right? Because there was somebody who said, imagine what Itauma's going to be like when he peaks at 27, 28. And somebody jumped in and said, well, why are you assuming he's going to peak then? A lot of fighters, like historically, heavyweights who turn pro young, they peak young. They don't peak at no 27, 28. Mike Tyson peaked at about 23. Just to put it in perspective, yes, Mike Tyson peaked at about 22, 23. After the age of 22, 23, he started going downhill. So he was like an extremely bright burning flame that didn't burn for very long. Whereas other fighters like Lennox Lewis, his flame never burned as bright as Mike Tyson, but it burned for longer, like that. So, yeah, we can't assume that Itauma is going to be around for that long in terms of peaking. I'm sure he's not at his peak yet, but his peak might come sooner than people realize. I mean, you look at some of those heavyweights of the 70s. Joe Frazier peaked when he was about 24, 25, After that, it was all downhill for Joe Frazier. Henry says Ali peaked at 32. No, Ali definitely didn't peak at 32. Ali peaked again about maybe 24, 25 in the 60s. Ali peaked in the 60s. But when he came back in the 70s, he was nowhere near as good. He still had some of his best wins, but he was nowhere near as good in the 70s as he was in the 60s. So he peaked in the 60s, again, young, around maybe 24 or something, 25. He peaked young. And again, Joe Frazier peaked young, mid-20s. Afro Jam says Itauma looks 30 and he's 20. Yeah, I don't get that personally. People say he looks old. I don't think he looks 30. I don't know. I think he looks his age. He looks like an early 20s guy. Riddick Bowe probably peaked in his mid-20s as well. Riddick Bowe might have peaked 25 or so, 26 maybe, because Riddick Bowe retired the first time after he lost to Andrew Galot. Well, he didn't lose, but both Andrew Galot fights ended in disqualification. So he actually won both fights. And he kind of unofficially retired after that. And he was only 27, 28. And by that point, he was done. Like he'd been in all sorts of slugfest with Holyfield and the tough fights with Galota, so on and so forth. Riddick Bowe was basically done by the age of 27, 28. Finished. Shout out to Jack Trussler for the super chat. He says, big up. Canelo versus Crawford, who you got? I got Canelo because I think that Crawford is going to have to do so much damage to get a decision. I can't see it. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, I've heard a statistic that many people who get involved in hard drugs are associated with Catholic families or broke off religious families. You know what? I've heard the same thing. Yes, I have heard that over the years. The idea, I guess, is that it's partly rebellion against the extremely strict Catholic upbringing and the shaming that is associated with that particular type of Christianity, all about counting sins and all that type of business, constantly being shamed for this and shamed for that and shamed for the other. And I was saying in the stream the other day that shaming is good to some extent, but obviously you can overdo it and, shame people into rebellion, shame people into having some type of complex. I've never been religious, but most of us who are raised in, nominally Christian or in some cases Muslim countries, we have Abrahamic thinking pretty much programmed into us from a young age, even if we're not raised in strict religious households, because Abrahamic thinking is ingrained in the culture. Do you know what I mean? So the way that we look at certain acts, subconsciously we think about it in a particular, we almost look at it through a Christian lens. And certainly the way we look at spirituality is through an Abrahamic lens, even if we're not practicing Christians or whatever. Yeah, if somebody is doing a ritual, we instantly think it's evil because that's what Christianity, Islam, etc. teaches you. That spirituality that we don't understand, where people are doing rituals and all this kind of stuff, even if it's not a sacrifice ritual, just a ritual that we are not familiar with, we instantly assume it's evil, it's the devil, it's weird stuff, you know? Yeah, Nathan Gorman did look old for his age, for sure. Nathan Gorman definitely looked old for his age. Afro Jam says, to see a 19, 20-year-old with a receding hairline and full beard, he looks old. I don't think he looks old. I don't think he's got a receding hairline either. I just think that's what his hairline is. Some people have a hairline that's all the way back there. So now, Tama don't look young to me. I mean, don't look old to me. He don't look like a 30-year-old man to me. He looks young to me. Maybe it's also his demeanor that makes you think he's old, because he's got a very like stoic demeanor. Normally young people, you think of young people as being like animated and energetic when they talk and stuff like that. They give off a youthful energy, whereas his energy is like, Moses Talma. I mean, he talks in that monotone. But nah, to me, he don't look old at all. Yeah, Nathan Gorman definitely looked old. From day one, he looked really old. Yeah, zombie tone. Dragon says, do you agree that the UK is cooked and will you ever return? People always ask me this. I've got no reason to return. You know, no reason to return unless there was some like tax thing or business thing that I needed to sort out. But in terms of moving back there, I've got absolutely no reason to. No reason to at all. And is it cooked? I mean, it's all a matter of perspective, innit? But yeah, economically, the West is in decline and it's not going to stop because the geopolitical hierarchy is changing. It is what it is. My thoughts on Tommy Robinson. You mean Tommy Robinstein? He's a shill. That's what I think of him. Jake says, Hatman, I heard you mention on a live a while ago about the Irish having some of the most violent criminals for such a small country. Can you think why? No, it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. Like if you go on YouTube and look up like the Irish drug wars, it's very strange, you know? It's kind of like Sicily. You know, the mafia, the mob came from Sicily. And Sicily wasn't a particularly like overall violent country or part of Italy, as I understand it, but it had this extremely violent underworld with the mafia. And I guess Ireland is like that. Overall, Ireland's crime isn't that high, except for this extremely hardcore drug industry that they have there. I don't know what that's all about. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, what are your thoughts on men becoming red pill Andrew Tate enthusiasts once they get rejected? Objectively pushing away organic human emotion, social media has made pain in company a literal term. When the pendulum swings in one direction to its absolute apex, inevitably it will swing back in the other direction. And that is what people like Andrew Tate represent. Andrew Tate, fresh and fit, Kevin Samuels when he was alive, these kind of people, they are the yin to the yang, you know? Since liberalism has gone, and when I say liberalism, it's really pseudo-liberalism. It's not real liberalism, but they call themselves liberals because true liberalism is the tolerance of views other than your own, the tolerance of views that oppose your own. And the liberals are literally the opposite of that, right? They're extremely intolerant. But yeah, the pseudo-liberals, neoliberals, whatever you want to call them, they have become so extreme that the Andrew Tates of the world were an inevitable consequence. Do you know what I mean? Inevitable. Exactly as Kylie said, extreme leftism is why we have guys like Andrew Tate. Yeah, it's inevitable. That's the pushback. And the pushback is going to be just as extreme as the initial push. It's called fighting fire with fire. And it's going to take some time for an equilibrium to be reached, you know? But I think these are necessary processes to get back to somewhere that is more reasonable, you know? Middle ground where neither side is being extreme. Afro Gem says, I'm going to be honest, a lot of people come here have fake ages. So you think Atama might have a fake age? Well, when Teddy Atlas first saw Mike Tyson, he thought his age was fake. He saw Mike Tyson at 12, 13 years of age and he was like 200 pounds or 190 pounds, whatever, solid muscle. And he had like a little wispy beard and he was like, where's the birth certificate? How the hell are you 12? And wherever he would take Mike Tyson to amateur events and whatnot, or smokers, which are like off the record fights, he said the guys there would say, no, Teddy, this guy's not 12. This guy's not 13. What are you doing? You bringing an 18, 20-year-old kid here. You're trying to pass him off as a 13-year-old. Yeah. Dominic says, I feel Dylan White is older than what he says. I don't know. To me, Dylan looks his age. So it's possible he could be older, but to me, he doesn't look older than his stated age. What do I think of Nigel Farage? Not much. You'd be hard-pressed to find a politician that I think much of, Farage included. Farage is, he's more like a comedian to me, you know? An unintentional comedian, because the man has got a funny-looking face. When he talks, it's funny. And You know, you always see them pictures of him drinking IPA ales and I mean, British politics is in quite a state when like Farage is the #1 alternative. So to me, he's like a cartoon character, you know? He's a cartoon character. Yeah, did Brexit then bounced. And really, the most absurd thing about Farage, right, was during 2020 when he called for Tony Blair, who left office many, many years ago. He called for Tony Blair to be brought in during 2020. I mean, how bizarre is that? One of the worst war criminals, psychopaths. And Farage was recommending that he be brought in to run the show during 2020. What in God's name was that all about? He, you know, if Farage was even slightly genuine, he should be pushing for a man like Tony Blair to be locked up for the rest of his life. You know what I mean? Like, what's he talking about? Bring Blair in to do it. Unbelievable. A shout out to Jack for the super chat. He says, Jermaine Franklin is a good test for a Talma. Yeah, I've been saying that in my videos, that Jermaine Franklin is the opponent, I think, to give a Talma round. So Dominic K says Boris was the ultimate jester. Yeah, that's where we're at now. You got these joke characters. I mean, I remember when Boris became London mayor, and it was seen as like the Twilight Zone. Like even when the Conservative Party, the PM at the time, David Cameron, was asked about Boris, he obviously went to school with Boris. When he was asked about Boris, the interviewers would say things to him like, what do you do about a problem like Boris? I swear that's a quote or a paraphrase from The Sound of Music, right? Or one of them musicals. What do you do about a problem like Boris? Boris was seen as this buffoon, like a mascot for the Bullingdon Boys. Do you know what I mean? He was like the buffoon of their group in the Bullingdon Boys, who they used to get in headlocks and, do you know what I mean? And somehow that guy with the messy hair, then they've put him in position as the mayor. Yeah, and it was onwards and upwards from there, wasn't it? Strange times. Boris, well, Boris is also Turkish. You guys know that, right? Boris Johnson is actually Turkish, or part Turkish. Copezilla says, what is he? Yeah, he's part Turkish. Look it up. It was, I'm not sure if it's on his mom's or dad's side. Nah, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than 0.0. He's like got a lot of Turkish in him. And his ancestor, who's only a couple generations back, was like this Turkish journalist. I think he was a journalist in Turkey. Yeah, Boris Johnson's Turkish. There's everyone thinking he's like the most pure British, you know, upper crust, tough aristocrat. But actually, yeah, his great granddad was Turkish. In fact, let me look up Boris Johnson's Turkish great granddad. Let me have a look here. Tell you what his name was. We should call him Boris the Ottoman now. Yeah, here we go. His name was Ali Kamal. Yeah, Boris Johnson's great granddad was called Ali Kamal. Ali Kamal was a Turkish journalist, politician, and writer. He was Minister of the Interior for some 3 months in the government of someone or other in the Ottoman Empire. So Kamal is the father of Zeki Kunalp, who was the former Turkish ambassador in Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and Spain. In addition, he is the parental grandfather of both the Turkish diplomat Selim Kunalp and the British politician Stanley Johnson. Stanley Johnson being Boris Johnson's dad. Through Johnson, Ali Kamal is the great-grandfather of former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So there you go, Boris the Ottoman. Shout out to Ibrahim. He says, is it crazy to say a Tamil would blast Bakoli out? Bakoli has power and size, but gets lazy in there and has slow feet. I don't think it's crazy at all. It's the heavyweight division. All it takes is one big clean shot on the chin, and Bakoli could be out of there. And the way a Talma hits and as fast as he is, it could happen. But I don't think a Bakoli fight's going to happen anytime soon. I think Frank Warren was just clout chasing with all that Bakoli talk. Star Fox says Salim is the most Turkish name. Well, damn. Yeah, you don't have to go too far back to find out that some of these guys are also immigrants. Mad, innit? Yeah, someone get Boris a fez. I swear Boris would actually suit a fez. Seriously. When I think of Boris Johnson putting a fez on his head, that actually suits him somehow. I almost feel like I've seen him in a fez at one point. Or maybe it was just a dream or something. But Boris looks like he would suit a fez. It fits. It really does fit. Ocean Blue says, I swear I've seen him in a Fez. Yeah, I feel like I've seen him in a Fez as well. I don't know why, but if I haven't seen him in a Fez, I've seen someone who looks very much like him in a movie in a Fez. A shout out to 4Fox. He says, hello, Bone Crusher Smith versus Derek Chisora. Who'd you pick? Apologies for such a random fantasy fight. I'll go Derek Chisora. Yeah, if we're talking about prime Chisora, I'd take Chisora over Bone Crusher Smith. And shout out to the Turks, by the way, because the Turks do the best value food in London is Turkish food. I've been saying this for the longest time. If you get anything else other than Turkish food in London, you're not going to get the same value, because everywhere else you go, they're going to give you the smallest amount of meat and just fill your portion up with carbs. Do you know what I mean? And stodge. Whereas when you go see them Turkish, man, they're sorting you out with loads of meat. Pause. Debiaka says, and the best barb as well. I can't speak for that. I don't know about their barbering, but I can definitely speak for their food game. And the Turks have been putting it down with the food game in London for the longest. So big up the Turkish crew. I mean, seriously, where would London and the UK in general be without kebab shops? Like, kebab shops are an integral part of British nightlife. You can't tell me I'm lying. When people come out of the pubs and the bars and the nightclubs, it's straight to the kebab shop, is it not? I mean, you know, kebab shops are such an integral part of British nightlife now. I can't even imagine what people were doing before kebab shops existed in Britain after they come out the clubs and the bars. Where would they go? It's all about the kebab shop munch. Chainsaw says, alcohol to kebab shop. Yes, doner meat and chips. There you go. You know. JR says, lamb doner meat looks like filet mignon at 3 a.m. when you're, yeah. McDonald's before, but McDonald's is horrible. McDonald's is such an unsatisfying, horrible munch, you know? McDonald's is not even food, bro. I ain't been McDonald's in years. It's nasty. Dog Boone says, come on, Hatman, in London, they don't know what meat and chips. Yeah, they do. What are you talking about? Everyone knows what meat and chips is in London. You must not be from London. Meat and chips is a standard thing in London. Everyone knows what doner meat and chips is in London. Afro Jam says that is the cheap doner, the proper Turkish doner, you know the quality. Yeah, like if you go to, so for example, there's a Turkish chain in London called Gökyüzü. Yeah, they've got several branches in various parts of London. I think it's mainly in North London. But if you go to Gökyüzü, their doner meat is not like the standard doner meat that comes out in strips. Their doner meat is more like, you know, like with Arab shawarma. Yeah, it's more like that. But yeah, I would very rarely go for doner meat anyway. I would always go for shish. Shish, chicken shish, lamb shish, or kofta. I do like a good kofta. Anyone like kofta? In the chat there, shout out to Bobs for the super chat. He says, I don't get emotionally invested in fighters, but Usyk heavyweight fights are stressful due to the scumminess involved. Dubois KO, suspect decision. Yeah, there was somebody in, and I hope they're wrong, because this guy, pound for pound, has been on a great run of predictions. A great run. I mean, he's just nailing it every time with his predictions. He predicted Dubois over AJ. Trust me, he's been nailing it with predictions. And his latest prediction the other day is that Dubois is going to knock out Usyk. And I was like, oh no. And I say, oh no, not because I got an issue with Dubois. I just don't want to see Don Charles. He's bad enough now. Imagine if Dubois beats Usyk, what Don Charles is going to be like. So no offense, Daniel, got nothing against the young man, but yeah, Don Charles is insufferable enough as it is. Afro Jam says, kofta with garlic sauce. I don't even like garlic sauce, but it goes well. It does too. Whenever I would get kofta, I get kofta with garlic sauce and chili, like a pot of chili and a pot of garlic with kofta. Banging. That kind of reminds me of an MOP lyric, right? Because, you know, in a Turkish place, it's all about the grill. And Little Fame of MOP, in one track, he goes, I like your grill up like Gordon Ramsay. Or Chef Ramsay, because they call him Chef Ramsay in the US. I like your grill up like Chef Ramsay. That bar killed me. Well, my favorite grills, right? Turkish food is right up there, but also Persian grills are really nice, because the Persians do a lot of grilled food. Their grilled food is serious as well. Yeah, Italian food is cool, but I prefer Turkish food because, again, you get all that meat. Italian food is so much carbohydrate and stodge, you know, tastes nice and all that. But yeah, the older I've gotten, the more I try and stay away from carb-heavy foods. Do I like Greek food? Well, Greek food is very similar to Turkish food, right? I've only had it a few times. They call their version of a kebab gyros, right? That's what the Turks call theirs, gyros. And for me, I still preferred Turkish kebabs over gyros. Shout out to Bobs, he says, also Dubois' dad is odd, but doesn't steal his son's fame. Yeah, I got no issue with Stan Dubois or Dave Dubois or whatever name he wants to go by. Still funny that Spencer Fearon accused him of doing witchcraft. Connor says, Hatman, did you ever get into the rapper R.A. the Rugged Man? Yeah, I had a couple of R.A. the Rugged Man records back in the days. He did a track with a guy called 8 Off the Assassin called Till My Heart Stops, and it featured on a mixtape called Sound Bombing Volume 1. So yeah, one side was Till My Heart Stops, and the other side, I can't remember the name of the B-side, but yeah, you know, I remember when his album came out and he had, I think, Inspector Deck on there. I forget, because his original name, R.A. the Rugged Man, was Crustified Dibs. Either that was his rapper name or he was part of a group or something. Maybe he was part of a group. I can't remember now, but either his original name was Crustified Dibs or that was the name of the group he was in. So yeah, I know about R.A. the Rugged Man. He featured on a lot of mixtapes back in the days, you know, on the underground and whatnot. And he was almost like a proto Eminem, R.A. the Rugged Man, you know, because he was basically rapping about being white trash. That's what all R.A. the Rugged Man's music was about. Like literally, he would just rap about being white trash. So one lyric I always remember is he said, "We're proud to be the lowest, low life losers. We flip your car over like Long Island steroid abusers." Yeah, it seems like that, Kylie. Seems like Stan is the guy that's running things and Don Charles is the bucket boy. Although, the longer they're together, maybe Stan starts to trust Don a little bit more and give him a little bit more control over his son. Rohan Brown says, who's your favorite UK grime artist? Favorite UK grime artist is D-double-E. Yeah, D-double-E. What do I think about Itama versus Usyk before he retires? I hope Usyk retires before that fight even comes along. If he beats Dubois, he needs to retire and sail off into the sunset. But Usyk is obviously a very hardcore guy. Very hardcore. He's such a hardcore guy that it seems like he's one of these people where unless he loses and gets destroyed, he's going to keep on going. And this is the sickness that afflicts so many great fighters. They just don't know when to stop. Have any of you guys seen the movie Kung Fu Hustle? And this is kind of a common theme in a lot of those old Kung Fu films. But in the movie Kung Fu Hustle, there's a villain, the main villain in the film. I think he's called the Toad. Is he called the Toad, or is Toad's style is a style of Kung Fu that he uses, right? And basically, he's locked up in some kind of insane asylum. But he is not in the insane asylum because he can't get out. He can get out whenever he wants. He just chooses to stay in the insane asylum until a challenger comes along worthy of him breaking out. You know what I mean? So he's waiting for all these years locked up in the insane asylum, hoping that one day somebody will be able to come along and challenge him and give him a worthy challenge. And it's as if Usyk is like that, you know? It's like he's obsessed. He wants to be pushed beyond the brink. Yeah, he's totally obsessed with the challenge. Ibrahim says, I think Usyk should fight Parker and then retire. I think he should retire now. I don't think he should have even taken the Dubois fight. But if he does beat Dubois, I think he should retire. Forget about Parker. Forget about anybody. Just retire. Just retire. Don't mess up your legacy. Don't push it too far. Just retire now. Get out at the top. Walk away, and he'll be a unique champion. He'll go down in history. The man that never lost. And I know Rocky Marciano never lost, but let's be real. Usyk is a lot better than Rocky Marciano. Do you know what I mean? If he retired after beating Dubois a second time, nobody would even talk about Rocky Marciano anymore. Because Usyk would be the guy, the the second heavyweight champion to retire and never lose. Look at his resume, cruiserweight, heavyweight. And you can make an argument that he is a top 5 heavyweight of all time based upon this. The guys he fought at cruiserweight, many of them were just as big as the heavyweights in the 70s. How about that? The heavyweights in the 60s and the 70s were no bigger than the guys that Usyk beat at cruiserweight. And of course, in the 60s and the 70s, the cruiserweight division didn't exist. So on that basis, you could argue that he's actually one of the top 5 heavyweights of all time. If he were to get beat by Daniel Dubois, Parker, or whoever else, if he continues, it's going to be more difficult to make a case for him. So I just say, retire as soon as possible. Call it a day. He's 38 years of age. He doesn't have time on his side to be trying to put together some big run, you know? I don't think beating Deontay Wilder would do anything for Alexander Usyk. Deontay Wilder's completely washed I see that as a pointless fight. I don't think there's any reason to fight Deontay Wilder at all. Deontay Wilder is more washed than Mike Tyson was when Lennox Lewis fought him. And when people talk about Lennox Lewis's resume, they very rarely talk about Mike Tyson as being one of his best wins, because it wasn't. Whenever people mention the Mike Tyson win, they're like, oh yeah, he beat the washed up Mike Tyson, so they don't really count that one. Well, Deontay Wilder is more washed up than Mike Tyson was, so I don't see any reason for Usyk to fight Mike Tyson at all. AJ says, I think he's more washed up than Mike Tyson, than the Mike Tyson that fought Jake Paul. Colbzilla says he's got fitness and lived a clean life, not taking much damage, you can hang on. But he has taken a lot of damage in the training camps. And when I say damage, it isn't necessarily damage to the head, it's damage to the joints, damage to the muscles. Do you know what I mean? And when you reach the level that he's been at, and you've made all the money that he's made, motivation is going to become a problem, especially at that age. He's a human being at the end of the day. He has gone out at Tottenham, you know, when he fought Anthony Joshua the first time. All those big fights in Saudi, the massive pressure. He's obviously a guy that thrives on pressure, thrives on the challenge, on the big occasion, rises to the big occasion. When you've been to the top of the mountain, when you've climbed the highest peak in the world, nothing can match that peak again. Do you know what I mean? That's why when he became undisputed at cruiserweight, he moved up to heavyweight. It's the next challenge. So, nah, I think Usyk has been on the decline for a few years. Because he's so good and he's got such great technique, he's been able to disguise the decline to a certain extent. But if you go back and watch the first Anthony Joshua fight, you'll see that he's definitely on the decline. He can't move the way that he used to move back. He still moves well, but not like he did when he fought AJ the first time. Not as consistently all the way through a fight. So he's been on the decline for some years, and it's only going to increase year by year. Jay's Crep says, have you heard of a rapper called Hieroglyphics? It was a group. The Hieroglyphics were a group. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, there was a lot of underground rap groups. They weren't all signed to Raucous Records, but Raucous Records was like one of the main homes for these underground rap groups. So off the top of my head, I can name a few of them. There was the Loot Pack, there was Company Flow, there was Hieroglyphics, there was, what was the other one called now? The guys who did the song, This is Futurama, with the cyborgs or Shoot Your Mama. Anyone know that chorus? This is Futurama with the cyborgs or Shoot Your Mama. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, what fighter had the steepest decline you've ever seen from one fight to the next, like aging overnight so severely it shocked you? That's a good question, actually. Let me think now. Maybe Evander Holyfield? Maybe Holyfield. But he did that several times in his career, where he would put in a good performance, and in the next performance, he looked like he was an old man, finished. So he put in that great performance against Riddick Bowe in the rematch. And then he comes back and he looks terrible against Michael Moorer. Gets outboxed and he just looks totally jaded, you know? And that's why Holyfield scored so many upsets and why he kept amazing people. Is because he would go from looking like he was totally finished in one performance. Then in the next performance, he'd be back on top. Then in the next performance, he looks totally finished again. So he was like up and down for much of his career, much of his heavyweight career. Shout out to Matt again. He says, for me, Nonito Donaire declined so quickly. Well, the decline of Donaire was really from the Rigondeaux fight, wasn't it? Because Donaire was the man up until he got beat by Rigondeaux. And then he just started losing and losing. Thank you, James. Non-fiction. That's the name of the group. Yes. This is Futurama. With the cyborgs Shoot Your Mama. So there was groups like Loot Pack, Company Flow, Non-Fiction, Hieroglyphics. Who is the other group that did Work the Angles? I Work the Angles, Sharp and Precise, Dilated Peoples. They were another one. They were actually from the West Coast, from LA, but they did kind of a New York style hip hop, underground hip hop. Yeah, Dilated Peoples. So the late 90s, early 2000s was really a very strong time for underground US rap, which today they would refer to as backpack rap. But yeah, Nonito Donaire's decline came after that Rigondeaux defeat. It seemed to affect him mentally, you know? Trolls Abad says, agreed against Fury, he had to take breaks. Yeah, he did. In the first fight in particular, he had to take several breaks in the fight. And you could see it was getting tough for him in there to push his body on. Whereas against AJ, in that first AJ fight, he just had a lot more energy than he did against Fury. And that's the age, it's the wear and tear, you know? There was another group, another underground group called the Smut Peddlers. See, I'm remembering all these old school underground hip hop groups. Who remembers the Smut Peddlers? Yeah, the Far Side, remember the Far Side? I always liked their video for the song Drop, where the video goes backwards. You remember Mad Skills? He had a track called Lick the Balls. Pause. I like the beat on that track though, on that Mad Skills track. That's a hard beat. Do they still make underground rap? I guess they do, right? I guess they still make underground rap, backpack rap. Shout out to Matt. He says, also random question time. Do you know any fighters with tons of losses who won world titles? Any fighters who were rocky that ended up very good? Well, the first one that springs to mind is Mike Weaver. Yeah, Mike Weaver had loads of losses and he did pick up a version of the world title. So yeah, Mike Weaver. Carlos Boldemir, somebody else said, yep, Carlos Boldemir. Orlando Salido. He's another one. Yep, Jersey Joe Walcott. Salido was basically a journeyman that went on to become a world champion. He was never expected to do anything in boxing. Afro Gems, his opinions on Immortal Technique. Dance with the Devil was a great track, right? His storytelling was pretty phenomenal in Immortal Technique. His storytelling songs were incredible in his early days. Matt says, I'm actually very convinced that Usyk will not defeat Dubois in the rematch. I just feel like the wear and tear will show in July. Man, I hope you guys are wrong. Because like I say, pound for pound, he's on a great run of predictions at the moment. He's saying the same thing. He's saying Dubois is going to beat Usyk. Man, I hope it don't happen. Nothing against Dubois. Again, I need to make that clear. I got nothing against Dubois. But I just want to see Usyk retire undefeated as a unique champion, secure his place in history. Do you know what I mean? It'd be such a shame at this late stage when he's done so much to have it all spoiled at the end with a rematch that he really didn't need to take. He's already beat the guy. It'd be such a shame to have that blot on his record. But, the best man will win at the end of the day. And we'll see who the best man is. So Matt has taken Dubois to win. Pound for pound, who's on a great run of predictions at the moment. He's taken Dubois to win. I hope you guys are wrong. But we'll see. Shout out to Lee Thomas. He says, Hatman, last year I did 13 countries in Africa. Namibia was a real highlight. So was Ethiopia. More people should venture into Africa. It's unspoiled, raw, and absolutely incredible. Yeah, I will be going to Africa this year, so stay tuned. You might see some random African stock footage popping up in my videos. I will be making forays into Africa this year, so shout out to Lee Thomas. And yeah, I would like to go to Ethiopia as well, particularly to see their ancient sites, because it's really a treasure trove and gold mine of ancient sites from the time of the Aksumite Empire, from the early centuries AD, well, really even BC, but they really started getting their groove in the early centuries AD with the Aksumite Empire, and they've got great monuments and temples and churches and all sorts of stuff there from the ancient world, which isn't as publicized as it is in places like Egypt, for example. But yeah, I'd like to go to Ethiopia to see those things. Shout out to Lee Thomas. Shout out to the Sweet Maths. He says, did Karen go when the money was low? I guess you're talking about Karen Eubank. Did she go when the money was low? I don't think the money got that low. I just think she got sick of the guy because he's insufferable. That'd be my best guess. I find it hard to imagine somebody wouldn't get sick of Eubank. Do you know what I mean? Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, if Usyk had the ability, I would love Usyk to become a trainer. Those gifts he has would be so beneficial to the heavyweight division, but not all fighters can be coaches, but would be nice. Fury too. You might see it. You might see it. I could see Usyk becoming a trainer more so than Fury, because Fury likes the limelight too much and being a center of attention too much. So I could see it more so with Usyk than Fury, but I wouldn't put it past Fury doing it either, to be fair. Shout out to Chainsaw for the super chat, but message retracted. Colpzilla says, when asking why do Africans or black people have big lips, flat noses, etc., they say it's to do with the heat. Well, why don't Australians have the same traits? Have you seen pure Aboriginal Australians? They kind of do have the same trait or similar traits. They're not exactly the same, obviously, but they do have similar traits. But these explanations for why people have particular features are theoretical. They're theories. They're not like, 100% proven, empirically proven things. They're theories that scientists come up with to explain why certain, phenotypes exist. It's all theoretical. Matt says, you mentioned that you're a pound for pound prediction specialist, but I don't know which prediction. No. I was talking about somebody called Pound for Pound. I wasn't referring to you. I was talking to a guy, referring to a guy whose username is Pound for Pound Boxing. And Pound for Pound Boxing is on this run of correct predictions. And it's a lot of correct predictions at this point, going against the grain several times. So he's killing it right now, Pound for Pound. He's killing it. A shout out to Matt. He says, prediction time, Edwin De Los Santos will become the new WBO lightweight champion. Defeated, I guess you mean defeating Keyshawn Davis by TKO before round 8. Jot that one down. All right, we'll jot that one down. Let me take a screenshot. There you go. You had that screenshot. I'll screenshot it. We'll see if that happens. Shout out to Matt. Anybody else like that prediction? Edwin De Los Santos to stop Keyshawn Davis before round 8. What do you guys think of that prediction? Yeah, Duke McKenzie's killing it too. That's right. A shout out to Matt. He says, I just say that because he's being grossly underestimated. Shakur didn't fight him at all, and the last person who banged with him got KO'd badly. All right, we shall see. We shall see. But I've made note of your prediction. It's a bold one. We'll see what happens. Rohan says your favorite Rocky movie villain. Favorite Rocky movie villain? Probably Drago, because the other villains were like Mr. T. I guess originally Apollo Creed was supposed to be a villain-ish. There was Tommy Morrison, Tommy Gunn, right? He was the villain. I didn't really care for much for the new Rocky films, Creed and all that. So I'd say Drago. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, I find the story of Jesus Christ was deep into hallucinogenics during the biblical development seems quite plausible in realistic thoughts. Okay, so there is a guy, John Allegro, and John Allegro and people who have piggybacked off his work were of the view that, yes, indeed, a lot of the stories from the time of Jesus and the stuff in the Bible was basically centered around mushroom cults, where, I'm not sure if it was psilocybin mushrooms, but various hallucinogenic mushrooms were taken by cults in the Middle and Near East, and that spawned a lot of the stories that end up in the Bible. So yeah, have a look at John Allegro and the mushroom cults of the Middle East. Shout out to Ozzy. Afro Jam says, where are the Roman documents on Jesus? Well, there are no, as far as I'm aware, there are no historical documents of the biblical Jesus, but there are historical accounts of other Jesuses in the Middle East in roughly that time period. Chainsaw says, if you think about it, it's a wonder how one human becomes so powerful. She has 2 arms and legs, breathes oxygen and bleeds. It's everyone else that gives them the power to do what they really want. That's correct. That's something that I've always kind of contemplated. Shout out to Chris Ward for the random 332. He says, Canelo Crawford, can't wait. Who you got? I got Crawford. I got Canelo. And the reason I got Canelo is I think Crawford's going to have to knock him out to win. And I don't think Crawford's going to knock him out. Canelo has got a good enough defense and he can fight at a slow enough pace to get the benefit of the doubt coming forward. Crawford's really going to have to fight out of his skin and do damage, I think, to get a decision. So even if Canelo doesn't deserve it, I reckon he'll get it. Matt says, are you predicting a robbery for Canelo Crawford possibly? Robberies are always possible when Canelo's involved, you know? He's such a cash cow. He's such an industry favorite. Thoughts on Reynoso's camp? 7 now PED positive fighters in their camp. Mexican beef? Too many tacos with Mexican beef? I'm being facetious, obviously. Those who think that there's something dodgy about Reynoso, it's understandable if that many people on PEDs keep coming out of that gym. Gorguga says the name Jesus has only been around for 500 years since the letter J was invented in 1524. Well, that's not quite right. That spelling has been around since then because, yeah, before it was a Y. So it would have been, you know, Jesus or something similar to that. Right? It would have been a Y rather than a J. Yeshua, yeah, something like that. Yeshua. Shout out to Matt. He says, imagine what these organizations could find out if they did an unannounced full-blown investigation drugs test on a stable's fighters. Yeah, imagine what they could find out, but of course that will never happen because these drug organizations are getting paid. You know, some of their biggest paying clients are the promoters and these big fight stables, and they would have to have access to be able to do that type of investigation. You know, the access is granted voluntarily. There is no overarching, you know, boxing governing body, like world governing body that has the power to come in and start testing everybody's fighters and whatever. So it'd be good if it did, but Dogboon says, if Jesus didn't exist, explain Christianity. The Greeks believed in Zeus and Hades and various other gods. Are you saying that because their spiritual beliefs existed, that means that their gods must have existed? Like, human beings can just make stuff up, embellish stuff. They can have basically characters which are an amalgam of various different historical figures, and they merge it all into one in their literature. And once a story becomes popular because it's such a compelling story, it makes it easier for people to start believing it. Do you know what I mean? So I'll give you an example. One of my favorite movies of all time is Gangs of New York. And Gangs of New York is loosely based on reality. Okay, so the main antagonist in Gangs of New York is a guy called Bill the Butcher Cutting. He's based on a real life historical figure called Bill Poole. Bill the Butcher Poole. But Gangs of New York was set later than the time when Bill Poole actually lived. Okay, the way that Bill Poole died was different in reality than the way they depicted it in Gangs of New York, so on and so forth. What I'm getting at is movies are a modern medium. You know, back in the days, it would have been plays, books, scrolls, and what have you. Okay. And if a play or if a scroll or a particular book became very, very popular over time, a cult could form around that book. And this cult would then start saying, what is in this book is actually true. These characters in this book were real. And the bigger the cult gets, the more popular it gets. People start fabricating all kinds of other stuff and, you know, so on and so forth. And it takes on a life of its own. Human belief is a very, very powerful thing. You know, very, very powerful. I mean, you just look at the cults that have existed over the past 50, 60 years, you know? So it's very easy to see how somebody who didn't exist or somebody who was a normal person, through the course of time, their story and who they are can get totally embellished and can get merged with other historical characters, and all that kind of stuff can go on. And you end up with something which is very, very different to the reality. Ibrahim says, isn't there historical evidence that Jesus existed? To my knowledge, there is no historical evidence that the biblical Jesus existed, but there were other Jesuses. So when people talk about historical Jesus, they're often not talking about biblical Jesus. They're talking about somebody else who might have lived, you know, somewhere around the time of the 1st century or 2nd century, but a different Jesus. Well, yeah, somebody there is saying Jesus' story was partially based on the Krishna story from Hinduism and parts inspired by the, how do you pronounce that, Inanna story in Sumeria. And also there's a lot of parallels between Jesus and Buddha. A lot of parallels, because, you know, the most common narrative is that the Abrahamic religions were formed in the Middle East and then they spread east and west, right? East into further into Asia and west into Europe. But I think it's very likely that the Abrahamic religions actually took a lot of influence from the East. A lot of influence for the Abrahamic religions came out of India and, do you know what I mean? The Indus Valley and all that. So while those religions might have started in the Middle East, I think they took influence from other parts of the world as well, you know, particularly India. A shout out to Matt. He says, I find it interesting that people can point out lies, but when it comes to religion, humans suddenly don't have the capacity to lie. Contradictions. Yeah, that's why it's called faith, right? And I don't want to attack people's religion here, by the way, because I've got a respect for religion and I know how it helps people and stuff like that. So I don't want to come across like I'm attacking Christianity or attacking any religion, but I'm just, you know, voicing my thoughts when people ask me certain questions. I just tell you what I think, but, you know, don't let me make you doubt your religion. If your religion is working well for you, then you're on the right path if it's working well for you. Do you know what I mean? We've all got to find a way to get through life being as sane as we possibly can. And if religion helps you do that, more power to you. Shout out to Matt. He says, Gangs of New York is a beautiful movie. Also, I'm excited for 28 Weeks Later. I love Danny Boyle's movies and Cillian Murphy. S-tier actor, period. Well, yeah, somebody said 28 years later. 28 Weeks Later was quite rubbish. I actually watched that. 28 Days Later is a classic. It's got Brendan Gleeson, Cillian Murphy. Yeah, it's a classic. 28 Years Later, I'm not really looking forward to it, to be honest. But yeah, Gangs of New York, beautiful movie. The sets were amazing. The acting was incredible. The story was compelling. The performances are all terrific. Gangs of New York was well received when it came out, but I feel like historically, it's a really underrated movie because people don't really bring up Gangs of New York as being in many top 10 movies of all time lists. Not like there's a definitive top 10 movies of all time list anyway, it's all subjective, but I do feel like that's a slept on movie. Gangs of New York is a fantastic film. James Robertson says, what do you think about the Shroud of Turin? It's a fraud. It's been shown to be a fraud a very, very long time ago. So it's just a fraud. And coming up with like fraudulent artifacts from the life of Jesus has been going on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years for obvious reasons. If you want to bring people into your church, fabricate something that was something to do with Jesus and people are going to flock in. It's as simple as that. So Shroud of Turin has been proven to be a fraud a long time ago. NJ says this live is way more deep compared to the yesterday's one. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I just go wherever the chat takes me, you know? You guys want to talk about deep stuff? We can talk about deep stuff. Yesterday we were talking about who we would smash between what was it, Oprah Winfrey and Greta Thunberg? I didn't put that question in the chat. And there was a certain savage man who was saying they would pick Greta. That's why I came with the Greta GIF. Let's put the Greta GIF up just to freak people out. There you go. Shout out to Fight Sport Talk. Yep, how dare you? Oh my gosh, J. Cool is saying Greta all day as well. We got another savage in the chat. If you really want to get savage, how about this one? You might not remember this person. Who would you rather smash, Greta or Sonia from EastEnders? Shout out to Matty says, I've heard that Sadhguru is a fraud too. Well, I don't know too much about him. I'm aware of who he is, but India is the land of gurus, isn't it? And an enormous number of them are obviously going to be frauds, charlatans, shysters, you know, miracle men. Yeah, a lot of them are going to be frauds. What? Dragon says Sonya was hot back in the days. Now, you must be trolling. You must be trolling. Somebody says prime Sonya Fowler. No. But so does Sonya, Carlos. Sonya looks like that too, Carlos. Yo, Sonya from EastEnders, no thank you. Lincoln says Kate Abdo or Laura Woods. Laura Woods? Kate Abdo's horrible, bro. Kate Abdo's like grisly as hell. Now, definitely Laura Woods. 1,000,000% Laura Woods over Kate Abdo. God, Kate Abdo's got, she must have an eating disorder or something. She's gone down the route of, when you first said Laura Woods, I was thinking of the other girl, because I was like, oh my God, that's a demonic choice. I was thinking of, who's the one on Sky Sports? The anorexic one? Anna Woolhouse. Yeah, Anna Woolhouse. I was like, oh, what a horrible choice between Woolhouse and Abdo. But then I was like, oh no, Laura Woods. Oh, it's definitely Laura Woods over Kate Abdo. Kate Abdo's awful, bro. I don't know what Malik Scott is doing there, but you know, that's his wife, whatever, but no thank you. She's like 120 pounds of gristle. Literally. Mad gristly. Triple R says Bianca was more butters than Sonya. Yeah, Bianca was butters too, but so was Sonya. They were both butters. See, we got some savages in the chat. BG London says Sonya will get my trumpet. Oh dear. I'm trying to think of some other characters out of EastEnders that I could do a comparison with. How about who was the one that was who was the woman that was married to Alan? Alan, the black guy. What was the wife called? The white woman. What was her name? Carol Jackson, right? So who would you smash? Carol Jackson or Kat Slater? Carol Jackson or Kat Slater? There's one for you. Shout out to Matt. He says, would you rather be trapped in a room for a night with Rhea Ripley or Sky Nicholson? Okay, I have to look up Rhea Ripley. I don't know who she is. Let's have a look here. Oh my God. It'd have to be Sky Nicholson. This Rhea Ripley looks like some kind of man. It definitely has to be Sky Nicholson then. Kat Slater was literally Donald Trump orange. That's what she was, bro. Literally Donald Trump orange. She looked like she'd been tangoed. See, now you guys are getting savage. Yeah, you're going to Coronation Street, you're talking about Gail. Oh my gosh. Some of you guys are twisted, you know, when you're bringing Gail into it. All right, who would you smash, Gail or Deirdre? See, since you're trying to come with savage ones, there you go, I'll give you a savage one back. Gail Tilsley or Deirdre Barlow, yeah? How's that for savagery? Kylie says, I'd sooner sleep with Wellard the dog over Kat Slater. And you know one thing about EastEnders, right? EastEnders and most British soaps were basically cursed. Yeah, they were cursed because the vast majority of actors who acted in those soaps never ascended any higher than the role that they had in that soap. Yeah, the only one there might have been one or two that managed to break the curse. Ross Kemp never broke the curse. He had to actually come out of acting and start doing those reality shows about crime to actually kick his career on. But in terms of acting, it was like basically a death sentence for your career. If you wanted to go anywhere in acting, the last thing you needed to do is be in EastEnders because you wouldn't go anywhere. So many of them tried to crack Hollywood, you know, from EastEnders, and they never made it. Shout out to Funny Faces coming through with the bag again. Says, glad you're alive, bro. Deirdre Barlow would have that crazy sloppy. What? Oh my, I don't even want to imagine that, bro. Shout out to Funny Faces. Oh my God, I'm trying not to think about what you just said. Oh my days, shout out to Matt. See, this is getting sadistic now, guys. You lot are actually getting sadistic. This is like a race to the bottom now. Because Matt is now saying, you're put at gunpoint, you have to sleep with either Whoopi Goldberg or Jennifer Coolidge. Which one would you pick to survive? See, if you've once again mentioned someone I don't know, let's have a look. Who's Jennifer Coolidge? I'm assuming she's horrible. Let's have a look who Jennifer Coolidge is. Whoopi Goldberg or Jennifer Coolidge? Dear, oh dear. Jennifer Coolidge looks like a bag of spanners. That's a horror. See, I might have to sit this one out, bro. Like, come on, man. What are you trying to do to me here? Jennifer Coolidge or Whoopi Goldberg? I need therapy after that. No matter what the choice is, gun to my head, which one? Oh my God. Oh my God. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Whoopi Goldberg. Why are you lot doing this to me, man? Why are you lot doing this to me? Big up big up Funny Faces. The mind boggles. Richard Blackwood. Richard Blackwood joined EastEnders on the way down. And Richard Blackwood never really went anywhere in acting anyway. Richard Blackwood's career was basically finished, done. He was suffering from depression, and that's when he got basically a life. I think he was working in Panto, Richard Blackwood. He was actually working in Panto, and that's when he got the gig in EastEnders, and he saw it as like a lifeline for his career. So he was on the way down, and that's when he got the EastEnders gig. Kugan Cassius was an extra in EastEnders. I'm not sure how many times, but he was definitely in at least one episode as an extra. Yeah. Look, it should be on YouTube. Just look up Kugan Cassius EastEnders and you'll see him there in the background. I think maybe in the calf, either in the calf or the Queen Vic. Kugan was in the background. Yep, bent legs. You know, I remember when Kugan did an interview with John Fury years ago, many years ago, and John Fury started inquiring about Kugan's background, and Kugan, you know, he asked Kugan what religion he is, and Kugan didn't want to answer. And I found that really curious, because Kugan's Sri Lankan, and in Sri Lanka they have all kind of like quote unquote pagan religions, you know, I guess offshoots of Hinduism and stuff like that. And Kugan, he was asked directly by John Fury, you know, what religion, and Kugan didn't want to answer. I was like, why? Do you know what I mean? It's weird. Yeah, Kugan was a bodyguard, that's right. He was a bodyguard for Ricky Hatton, and you can see him walking Ricky Hatton to the ring, that's correct. He was a lot bigger back then. Like, Kugan was quite fat during that time. Dead Hand says, no way. Yeah, Kugan was Kugan was Ricky Hatton's bodyguard for a while. He walked him to the ring, and yep, that's one of the ways that he actually got a foot in the door when he started doing boxing interviews with him and James Helder, is because of the fact he'd worked as Ricky Hatton's bodyguard. Afro Jam says Sri Lanka is a troubled country. His family may have had to flee as refugees, or maybe, but I still don't see why that would make him hesitate to answer the question about what religion he is or religion his family is. A bit odd, because it's not like it's going to be a religion that John Fury knows about anyway. So just mention it. In fact, let me look up the religions of Sri Lanka, because yeah, they're like offshoots of Hinduism as far as I'm aware, which isn't really a religion, but you know, it's a spiritual system. Okay, so Buddhism is the most widely practiced in Sri Lanka, and that accounts for, let's have a look here. Okay, 70%. Wow, I didn't know it was that high. 70% of Sri Lankans are Buddhists, 12% Hindus, 9% Muslims, 7% Christians. Okay, so it's a mostly Buddhist country. I didn't realize it was that overwhelmingly Buddhist. All right, and then Hindus 12%. Wow, okay, overwhelmingly Buddhist then. Yeah, Kugan may not be religious, but John Fury was basically asking what his religious background is. You know, his family certainly will have a religious background, probably Buddhists, right? Just going off statistical probability, probably Buddhists. If not, then Hindus. But Kugan didn't want to answer. Very strange. What happened to James Helder? James Helder was bought out by Kugan, and he started a football channel, which never went anywhere. And then he's just as far as I'm aware, drifted off into obscurity. There were some people saying that James Helder went to prison. I don't know whether that was true, because initially when people were saying he was in prison, he then started tweeting saying that he's not in prison. So I don't know. But he was bought out anyway. He sold his stake in IFL and moved on. Okay, so someone here is saying that James Helder went to prison. James Helder went to HMP Winston Green. I always remember that James Helder video where he was rapping. He was like dressed up in some kind of like military uniform or Navy uniform, and he started rapping. Tyan Booth used to play that on his channel all the time. You know, the one where James Helder says you're a plum. That one. That was cringe as hell. Yeah, put him in the bag, put him in the trunk. That's right, you're a plum. The status of a plum, that's the one. Yeah, you got the status of a plum, you're a plum. Oh my days. Status of a plum. Dear oh dear. Yeah, ironically he did. Helder did end up with the status of a plum, but then again he started off with the status of a plum, rose up with IFL, and then went back to the status of a plum. Jake says, can you see Turkey being involved in boxing for the long term, or will he eventually get fed up of the constant issues within the sport? Well, Turkey is not the one calling the shots. MBS is the one calling the shots, and Turkey will continue in boxing for as long as MBS tells him to. I don't think Turkey has any choice in the matter. He's been assigned to that task, and you know, ultimately MBS will tell him how long he has to do it for. Mark Odell says Kugan Cassius was an undefeated amateur boxer, was he? What, like Eddie Hearn? Did Eddie Hearn claim to have, because he claims to have boxed, but what was his record? Did he claim an undefeated record? Eddie Hearn? Eddie Hills? O'Neill says, who is NBS? Well, M for mother and M for man. MBS is Mohammed bin Salman. He is the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, the de facto ruler. He's, like I say, basically the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. He's the one that runs the country, and you know, he will be the one that decides how long Turkey has to stay in boxing and all that stuff. Linker says, do you think dictators are better than elections? I guess you mean better than, do I think dictatorships are better than democracy? In some cases, yes. I was actually thinking about this today when I went out for a walk. Because on yesterday's stream, we talked about John Magufuli in Tanzania. When he became president there, he was very dictatorial and he was able to get a load of stuff done. Also thinking about MBS, right? The changes that both of those guys brought about in their countries could not have, such radical changes in those countries couldn't have been possible if they were not ruling with an iron fist. If they tried to come through and be all democratic about it, they wouldn't have got all the stuff done. Do you know what I mean? And so there is like a general idea that the best form of governance is a benevolent dictatorship. But then again, benevolent is all a matter, so it's a point of view, isn't it? It's very subjective. To some people, one ruler will be benevolent, and to other people, he's malevolent. So it all depends on who you are as an individual, where you are in society, what your views are, what your values are, and if they align with the dictator. So yeah, it really depends. But I mean, even if you look at like British history, there were times in British history under dictatorships where the dictator is said to have done loads of good things and made loads of different reforms and helped Britain out. And do you know what I mean? Today, dictatorship is synonymous with evil. You know, that's the way it's characterized in the West. If somebody is a dictator, then they are necessarily bad and evil and they're doing terrible things in their country. But that's not necessarily the case in reality, is it? Sometimes a dictator can actually be better because dictators can get things done quickly. Whereas when you have a more democratic system, you can get bogged down with, you know, dealing with Parliament, the Senate, so on and so forth. Trying to get things passed through, it can be difficult. Whereas when you're a dictator, you don't have any of that. You just do, you have an idea in your head, bam, you go do it. And I saw this firsthand when I lived out in the Middle East, like how quickly building projects would go up. From inception to the thing being finished was incredibly fast. Do you know what I mean? Incredibly fast when I lived out there. You can't do that if you live in a democratic country, because all the planning permission, and then you get people protesting it, and then you get other MPs having their constituents complaining about this and doing this, that, and the other. And it takes a much longer time to get stuff done in a more democratic system. Whereas when it's a dictator, they can get stuff done so far, less bureaucracy, exactly, yeah. They can get stuff done so fast. But obviously you have to have a competent dictator. Yeah, because obviously there are plenty of dictators that are not competent. But if you've got one that's competent, intelligent, and they do have the best interests of their nation at heart, then it can be better than a democratic system. Shout out to Ibrahim. He says, what top 10 heavyweights would you fight for 20 ms? What's that? 20 minutes or 20 million? Please clarify what you mean by 20 ms. Somebody says if you're a dictator, you don't have to deal with parliamentary procedures. Indeed, 20 million. What top 10 heavyweight would I fight for 20 million? I fight any of them. I would fight any heavyweight in the world for 20 million right now in my mid-40s. No problem whatsoever. Like, that's the easiest question all night. I'm pretty sure most people here, if not everybody in the chat, would fight a top 10 heavyweight for 20 million. I'm 100% up for that. 100% up for that. I mean, talk about easy money. Get chinned in the first round and get 20 million. Fantastic. You know what I mean? Just say when. There you go. Just say when. You think I'm putting up a serious fight? It's a one-off. Yeah? Just look for a nice comfy place on the canvas and collect the bag. Then I'll be as rich as Funny Faces. Shout out to Funny Faces. Pick up my guy. Funny Faces. How many amateur fights? About 35 amateur fights. You get me? Where do I sign? Sign me up. You're giving money away like that? I've been punched in the face plenty of times. You don't scare me. And this time even better because I don't have to try and win. Because for those who haven't boxed or maybe haven't been in fights, getting punched in the face in most cases doesn't hurt, especially if you get hit really hard. You actually hear the punches more than you feel them in most cases. It's a jolt that you feel. It's not pain. It's like a weird jolting sensation. And you can sometimes hear the shots. And it's weird. It's kind of discombobulating when you get hit and you hear the shots, but you don't really feel pain or anything like that. If you haven't sparred for a long time or fought for a long time, you have to get used to that feeling again. Yeah, even in street fights, you know, I remember having a street fight when I was about 12. There was this kid from another school, and because I was a rough youth and I was very cocky and I was always acting like a tough guy and all this type of business. This was around the time I first got into boxing. I literally thought I was Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, and everybody. So I was always running my mouth and this, that, and the other. And so, you know what other kids are like? They were like, okay, let's see him fight this one and let's see him fight that one and, you know, whatever. So they would then go running back and forth to tell other people, oh, he thinks he's bad and, you know, rare. And so anyway, one thing led to another. And this kid from another school who was the year above me, who I've never met before, right? Don't know him, never met him, but because my name is ringing in my school and his name is ringing in his school, all of a sudden we've got a fight and I've got beef with someone I've never met before. You know them ones. So anyway, I was walking home one evening. Again, I must have been 12, 13 years of age with a couple of my older brothers. No, I was walking home by myself from my best friend's house, and I bust a corner and I came onto not my road, but the road before my road. And I saw a couple of my brother's friends and they told me that this guy from this other school, right, who's like a year older than me, was there waiting for me. You know what I mean? At the top of my road. And I was like, oh, snap. You know them ones where I was looking to go home and put my head down and get to sleep. But I'm being told that this guy's here out of the blue and he wants to fight. He's on smoke. And I'd never even seen him before. I just heard he was really big because I was big for my age. Even at the age of like 12, 13, I was big for my age. But he was even bigger than me. He was a year older than me. He was big. And I remember my older brother's friends were there with me, and I was like, well, there's no way that I'm going to try and turn away because I've got a reputation to uphold here. But I could see as I was walking towards the guy, he was with one of his friends and they were sitting on a wall, and I guess they clocked that we were coming towards them, and he got off the wall and I was like, wow, he's massive. And he was wearing dungarees. Back then it was a thing, right? Back in the early 90s, he was wearing like dungarees. And obviously part of me wanted to run, but the other part of me was like, nah, I could never live it down. So I just went charging into battle, literally like Braveheart, screaming. I was like, ah, you know what I mean? Screaming all sorts of cussing at him when I was coming at him. Pause. I charged into battle, and the rest of it was all a blur because it was just like, I got myself into a rage and just flew into the battle with this bigger guy, and I don't really remember that much of it. I remember at the end of it, we basically called it quits because we were fighting until we were both knackered. And we literally fought to a standstill, yeah? And when it was done, we were like, okay, cool, we're done, you get me? We don't need to keep fighting on. we said our words and mutual respect and all that kind of stuff. And then he went his way and I went my way. And obviously I told my brother about the fight, and I was telling people the next day in school about the fight. And I was telling people that I didn't get hit because at the time, I swear, I never felt any punches. But then my brother's friend said, you got hit a lot. What are you talking about? He was piecing you up. He was hitting you with combinations. And I was like, what are you talking about? I got hit a lot. And then I remember going to, you know how ignorant you are as a kid. I remember going to the bathroom and I looked to the inside of my lip and it was all cut in the inside of my lip. I was like, wow, that must have come from somewhere. I thought maybe when he grabbed me and because he tried to throw me against the wall and all sorts of stuff in this fight. But yeah, the adrenaline, because of the adrenaline, I apparently got hit a lot, but didn't feel any of the shots. Didn't even remember them. Yeah, and that's bare knuckle, obviously. Johnny Bosch or George Fox? That's actually quite a good fight, you know. I might go for George Fox over Johnny Bosch. I might actually go for George Fox on points, maybe. But it's a good fight. That's actually something that George Fox should target. He should target a fight with Johnny Bosch, Johnny Fisher. Would I back myself in my prime against Steve Robertson? Yes. Yeah. Did I ever lose a security fight as a bouncer? Must have been jumped or just filled in by too many of them. No, I never really got bashed up as a bouncer. The worst I ever got was a busted lip. Somebody just alluded to it there, which I talked about one of the stories in my Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series, where some guy who was high on God knows what punched me in the lip, and we got into a scuffle, but it got broken up, and I went looking for this guy because I was so angry, right? You know, after it all got broken up and all that, and I ran outside a few times to try and fight him again, but it kept getting broken up. So I was so angry because I had like a big cut lip, and I went to sleep that night and woke up in the morning and my pillow was covered in blood. I was so angry. I started talking to people. Well, I talked to a friend of mine and he knew certain people that knew who the guy was. So I went and tracked the guy down, and I won't give away what exactly what the story was. It's in Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer, but I tracked the guy down and I came out with a victory. Yeah, it was a sucker punch too. Yeah, it was. When the guy punched me, it was a sucker punch. It was a sucker punch. But when I tracked him down, there was no sucker punches and I came out with victory. Vidal Riley versus Chris Billam-Smith. Vidal Riley. Chris Billam-Smith is a good fighter, an overachiever, but I think Vidal Riley is really underrated by the British public. I think he's a really, really skillful boxer with great feet, great rhythm. I think Riley beats Chris Billam-Smith right now. Jake says, being from London, Hatman, have you ever heard of any stories about George Fox tearing people's limbs off and taking eyes out? He sounds serious. Yeah, definitely haven't, but I don't really have my ear to the street, quote unquote, right? Like that anymore, but I've never heard anything about the guy. Yeah, that's right. Triple R. Yeah, the guy, when I went to go find that guy, he thought I was approaching him on good vibes, and then I chinned him. That's right, because he was so high, and that's what baffled me. That's what baffled me. Perhaps he didn't recognize me when I was I don't know what it was, but he looked at me as if I was going to greet him, you know. And instead I started raining down blows. Trolls are bad says Vitaly Klitschko was a world champion kickboxer before boxing. I can't imagine encountering him in a street fight. Was he a world champion kickboxer? I forget now, but he got knocked out in kickboxing by a guy from the Midlands called Pele Reid, a British Jamaican guy who was based out of the Ingle gym, because he eventually became a professional boxer. Pele Reid, he wasn't very good, but in kickboxing he was pretty dangerous, and he knocked Vitaly Klitschko out. That is on YouTube. Shout out to Morazman for the super chat. That's something I definitely don't miss about my younger days, was all the beefs, the fights, the drama, and all that kind of stuff. I don't miss all that, man, because that can get out of hand very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. And when I look back at the stuff I got involved in when I was young, I shudder. Do you know what I mean? Because at the time, when you're young, you really live more in the moment and you're not thinking about consequences as much. You think about consequences to a certain extent. But when I look back and I think about some of the situations I was in, I'm like, wow, that could have gone really bad. Do you know what I mean? You don't realize the magnitude of it until later, or at least I didn't, you know? Afro Jam says, I enjoyed fighting. I didn't. I never enjoyed fighting on the street. I enjoyed fighting in the ring, but I never enjoyed fighting on the street. I never enjoyed it on the street. But what I enjoyed even less than fighting on the street was being disrespected. I couldn't live with disrespect. You know, if somebody got one over on me I literally couldn't sleep at night until I got my own back. Do you know what I mean? Like being disrespected or violated or anything like that, it just used to eat me or eat at me inside, and I could not rest until I'd done something. Do you know what I mean? So that feeling always overpowered any hesitance or fear that I had. Yeah, I had many fights. And because I didn't like fighting, that's why I was so vicious. Because I was vicious in fights. Yeah. Because I didn't want to be in a fight. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be in a fight. So I was like a cornered animal in a fight. You know what I mean? Where I was just going all the way in. I was trying to get it over with as soon as possible. So I was vicious. Kyle says, Hatman, thoughts on black fatigue? I've only just learned about this term, but it just sounds like a bunch of foolishness. Originally, the term apparently meant when black people feel fatigued about, discrimination and racism and all that. And now it's been flipped around for white people to say that they're fatigued and tired of black people complaining. It just sounds like a bunch of childish nonsense to me. I'm not even bothered about all that. Like the kind of race war, race baiting. I'm tired of all that. Do you know what I mean? Is there a term I can use for that? When you're tired of race war, race baiting, back and forth nonsense? I'm tired of all that. There you go, maturity. I'm tired of all that. And Alan says you're lucky you didn't have to worry about guns. Youngins don't fight now. It's the opposite. There was way more guns on the street when I was young than there is now. Way more. This is pre-Dunblane. There was way more guns in my time than there is now. There's hardly any guns on the street now. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, that was the peak time for guns in the UK. Peak time. Guns all over the place. So, we had to worry about guns, bro. There was people getting shot left, right, and all over the gaff. Goozy says it's knives you have to worry about now. Yeah, well, back in the days, it was both. Back in the days, knives and guns. Both. It was way more dangerous on the streets in the 90s than it is now. Way more dangerous. That's right, amnesties. Yep, we used to have amnesties all the time. Gun amnesties and all that. That's correct. On a regular basis, you'd see on the news, gun amnesty here, gun amnesty there. And the police would have pictures of all the firearms that they're taking off the street. Copezilla says it's creeping back up again now. It will never be like it was because gun laws were far more relaxed pre-Dunblane. So there was way more guns available, way more. I mean, it was so mad back in the early 2000s. In Brixton, I kid you not, in Brixton, there were people that had hand grenades, RPG. I'm not joking. There was man that had RPGs. I'm not aware of them ever being used, but I can tell you for a fact there was man that had RPGs. Yes, RPGs and hand grenades. And a couple of times hand grenades were used in Brixton. People actually used hand grenades. How about that? In fact, that reminds me, if you've ever heard of Nicholas van Hoogstraten, he's a British businessman from the South Coast, Brighton Hove area. And he actually got put in prison for throwing a hand grenade through a business rival's window. I guess that was in the 70s. Oh my days. Van Hoogstraten was always on smoke. That's right, the guy with the mausoleum. Yes, Van Hoogstraten. A very funny character. Yeah, the most violent times were the 90s. The 90s, early 2000s was the most violent times in recorded London history, actually. The highest number of recorded murders for a year in London, I think, was maybe 2004, 2000. So that's when it all peaked, in the very early 2000s. But throughout the 90s, it was very high. In 1991, I think there was around 200. So it was much, much higher, even in the early 90s, than it is today. Coming out of the 80s, Britain was depressed. The unemployment rate was extremely high. Coming out of Thatcher Britain when they shut down all the manufacturing and all that kind of stuff. It was a different world back then. It was a much more impoverished country in the 80s and coming into the 90s. The 90s obviously saw a bit of a resurgence and rebound from the hardship and the poverty of the 80s, but the 80s was an impoverished time in Britain. It's incredible to see some people try to paint this picture of 1980s Britain as like a utopia. Do you know what I mean? It's bizarre because I was there and 1980s Britain was impoverished, mate. It was very tough. It was football hooligans. It was, skinhead gangs, council estates, boys from the black stuff. Yeah, the 1980s was tough, mate. I don't know where people are trying to come with rose-tinted glasses talking about the 80s. It was a tough era. Somebody mentioning Cape Town there. Yeah, Cape Town is a completely different world. South Africa is a totally different world. Well, you know, it's a double-edged sword because London was a lot tougher in the 80s and 90s. Britain was tougher in the 80s and 90s. So obviously it was bad, but it was also good, you know? But then again, you do wonder to yourself how much of the stuff that you remember as being good is just nostalgia, is just, you know, reminiscing about you. Because there's always good things to do with your childhood, innit? Experiences you had, friends you had, adventures you went on. You're always going to have some fun memories. I mean, you could go to the worst slum in the world, and it's not like the kids never have fun. Do you know what I mean? Even in the worst slum in the world, the kids will have some good stories to tell when they reach adulthood. So, but there were definitely things I preferred back then. Popular culture, I preferred back then in the 80s and the 90s than today. BG London says, I couldn't go Brixton, I smelt like Peckham in the 90s. But yeah, even up north. Yeah, up north was way rougher back in the days. Way more rough. Newcastle was a lot more rougher. Manchester was much rougher. I mean, Moss Side today, as I understand it, Moss Side is not that rough today. Whereas back in the 90s, Moss Side was a war zone, bro. Moss Side, Longside, Cheetham Hill, even Salford. Those areas in the 90s were mad. Those areas were mad, mate. Even Nottingham was mad back in the 90s. Jake says, do you think certain areas of South Africa are more dangerous than Mexico? Probably, but it's probably close, innit? Because both countries are extremely violent, and the rough parts of those countries are just, you know, hell on earth. In Cape Town, you got areas like Mitchell's Plain, which is diabolically bad. Mitchell's Plain is part of the Cape Flats, and so in Cape Town, most of the big gangs and majority of dangerous criminals are colored gangs, right? So they're like mixed race. They're a particular racial class, or however you want to describe a racial group, that they call the coloreds in South Africa. And in Cape Town, they're the ones who have all the big gangs. It's the coloreds. I mean, all over South Africa is rough. Cape Town is very rough. Durban is very rough. Joburg is very rough. Pretoria is very rough. It's an extremely violent country, just all the way around. Incredibly violent. Afro Jump says Mexico has swarves and there are slums, but there are lots of places relatively safe. Yeah, that's true. But even in this is the kind of dodgy thing about Mexico, is even in the relatively safe parts of Mexico, the cartels are still everywhere, and you wouldn't even know, because a lot of the time the cartel members moonlight. Police officers in Mexico, all over the country, are cops by day and cartel members by night. That's a common thing in Mexico. A lot of the people who are in the police are actually members of cartels. People that own the hotels and resorts and stuff like that, it's often cartels. So you might be in a nice little area of Mexico thinking, oh, it's nice and peaceful around here, not realizing that there's actually killers all around, all around you. And because they control that town, that's why the crime is low, because nobody's allowed to commit any crime that they don't approve of. So they're almost like a de facto government, you know, in some of these places. Well, you know, South Africa, the only two places, let me not say the only two places, but the main two places in Africa that are really dangerous, are South Africa, and you might include Lesotho and a couple of other countries that are, you know, either within, because Lesotho is actually inside of South Africa. It's a weird thing, right? But it's its own country. But basically, South Africa has got a ridiculously high violent crime rate, and so does Nigeria. Nigeria is also very dangerous. But outside of those two countries, I don't know, there's certain other places in West Africa that are supposed to be, you know, have a really high murder rate, like I think Senegal and a few other places, Congo. But most African countries are relatively okay. I mean, they do have higher crime rates or, you know, murder rates than anywhere in the West, but they're relatively okay. It's not out of control because in most African countries, there's not a lot of guns. South Africa is different because it's awash with guns. There's loads of guns in South Africa, which is one of the reasons that the crime rate is so high. You know, there are impoverished and angry people that can get easy access to guns. You know the implications. But most countries in Africa, if you look at the stats and whatnot, they're relatively safe. Is it a spillover from apartheid? Well, of course it is. You know, when you radically change a country's system, you're going to have a long period of instability, especially when there's loads of poverty and guns and people frustrated with the government and all sorts of stuff. It's going to take a long time to stabilize. Yeah, you see, the thing about somewhere like Jamaica, violence has become part of Jamaica's culture. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how. I don't know how Jamaican can really solve its problem. You know, because when you go to other Caribbean countries where it's safe, you're like, why isn't Jamaica like this? You know, like you go to Barbados, it's so, obviously it's a tiny country compared to Jamaica. Jamaica's much bigger than Barbados, but still, you're in Barbados. It's like such a safe country in the Caribbean, and the people are far more polite. I'm not really a fan of Bayesian people, to be honest with you. Not trying to diss them, but when I say polite, they're more, Bayesians are polite. They're generally polite people. They're not necessarily the warmest people in the world. They're kind of reserved. I describe Bayesians as quite reserved people for the most part. They're relatively reserved, but they're usually polite. But the point I'm making is if you go to Barbados, you just don't have any issues at all, right? For the most part. I mean, you might get some odd trouble here or there, but it's a very safe country. But Jamaica is just the most dangerous thing I ever encountered in Barbados. And this was dangerous. And I'm not saying it's a rarity either, but like in many Caribbean countries and even in Africa, people get around in these little minibuses, you know, little white minibuses. And I remember there was one time when me and my girlfriend at the time got a minibus, you know, hopped in a minibus in Bridgetown, and we were going south down towards Silver Sands, you know, that area. And we hopped in this minibus, and the driver, like my girlfriend nudged me, and the driver had a full bottle of rum. And this was like in the middle of rush hour, you know, Barbados's version of rush hour. So it was quite busy, and he was driving erratic like they tend to do in the Caribbean. And music's playing, because he always play music in those minibuses. And she like nudged me. She said, look. And I looked over, and the driver had a full bottle of rum, which he was drinking while he was driving. White rum, and he was driving erratic, bro. So that's the most danger I was ever in Barbados. Minibus driver drinking on the job, hard liquor. Matthew Paris says, didn't know you've been to Barbados. Yeah, a few times. Mark Odell says Montego Bay seems pretty decent in Jamaica. Used to be, but Montego Bay has seen a massive upsurge in violence. Oh yes, Montego Bay. Even Montego Bay, which is where all the tourists used to go, you know, skip Kingston completely and straight to Montego Bay. But yeah, there've been all sorts of bad stuff happening now, even in Montego Bay. Mo Bay is not safe. Barbados or Trinidad, depends what you're looking for. But if you're just looking for safety, Barbados all day long. Trinidad is dangerous too. Trinidad is very dangerous. But Trini food is a lot better than Bajan food. So is Jamaican food. Jamaica and Trinidad got better food than Barbados for sure. Women, Barbados all day long. Barbados has got the nicest women of any Caribbean country I've been to. I think I mentioned this in yesterday's stream as well. Bajan women all day long, and twice on Sunday. African or Caribbean girls, African girls, definitely. But as far as the Caribbean goes, Bajan girls are number one. What do I think of Ethiopian women? Well, you see those videos, right, where Ethiopian women are doing a traditional dancing, and in many of those videos, the Ethiopian women are really pretty. I haven't seen extremely pretty Ethiopian women like that, like you see in the videos, many times in real life. The vast majority of Ethiopian girls I've seen in real life, they're just like, they're not like strikingly beautiful in it or anything. And I've seen a lot of Ethiopian women in real life, and most of them are just like not amazingly attractive to me. Not like they're ugly, but they just shrug my shoulders. But the ones you see in some of them videos, some of them are really pretty, you know, like stunningly beautiful. But the ones I've seen in real life, I don't know who the ones are in those videos, because I ain't seen them kind of Ethiopian girls in real life. Yeah, the ones in the video, the Ethiopian girls I've seen dancing in those videos, some of them are very, very attractive. But I have never seen Ethiopian girls that look like that in real life. I've just never seen them. And I've seen loads of Ethiopian girls, not just in London, but even more of them in the Middle East. But I never saw the ones who are like, in them video. I never saw, they're obviously in those videos because they're so attractive, you know? But that's not representative of the average Ethiopian girl from what I've seen. Grind says, have to disagree, Hatman. More, I mean, if you've seen those kind of girls, you've seen them. I'm just saying I haven't seen them. I've never flown an Ethiopian Airways. So if I do fly an Ethiopian Airways, maybe I'll see them on there, because generally, well, many airlines, at least to some extent, hire air hostesses on looks. With certain airlines, it's blatant. Yeah, they literally don't want any air hostess who's below a 7 in looks. Particularly, see, with Western airlines, they don't do that anymore. They've got no quality control in terms of air hostess looks. See, if you're flying on on British Airways or any of the European airlines, there's no quality control anymore. But outside of the West, they still have that beauty quality control with the air hostesses. Like if you fly on the Arab Airlines have got some beautiful air hosts. Actually, tell a lie, right? I do remember seeing one Ethiopian girl or Eritrean girl that was working in a hotel when I was out in the Middle East, and she was beautiful. Yeah, she was stunning. I remember now, there was one that was working in a hotel that I remember when I was sitting down and she came over to the table. I was like, damn. Yeah, she was a beautiful Ethiopian girl or Eritrean. One of the two. There's the same people anyway. But on the planes, they had like loads of Filipino girls who were, again, buff. You know what I mean? They had some peng Filipino girls working on Qatar Airways. Yeah, on Qatar. Yeah, see, O'Neal knows. That was my favorite airline when I was living in the Middle East, was Qatar Airways. And they had some of the most hottest air hostesses. Yeah, they very clearly and obviously had a policy where you had to be attractive, physically attractive to get a job. Whereas with like British Airways and all the European airlines, because it's so like feminist now, it would be seen as like horrible discrimination not to hire some fat, ugly chick. You know, like that. Mazzy says, how did you know she was Eritrean? Could you tell the difference? Well, Eritrean or Ethiopian. Eritreans, Ethiopians, they're all the same people. Those countries were only split in fairly recent history. Yeah, Qatar Airways was always my favorite airline. I liked the food, I liked the air hostesses and, and everything. Copezilla says, Ghana and Uganda do it for me, Cameroon too. In my experience, girls from those French-speaking African countries are rude. And French people are just rude in general. Shout out to the French crew. Mark Odell says, most of Ghana are heading to the UK en masse. Since when? D-Man says, I agree with the Francophone African countries, always found them to be arrogant. Yeah, funky attitudes. So I stay away from like Congolese girls and Cameroonian girls and all that. No, thank you. Seb says, are the British as hated as people say they are abroad? Depends what part of the world. Copezilla says, what African countries are the best for laid-back feminine women? Uganda's pretty good. Tanzania's pretty good. Zambia, even Zimbabwe. The countries I would avoid would be the French-speaking ones, Kenya and South Africa, and also Nigeria. Shout out to the Niger crew, but yeah, Nigerian women are just a no-no. No, thank you. Nigerian women are extremely materialistic, like ridiculously materialistic. Yeah, I reckon you're probably right there, Jay Silver. British people are probably most disliked in Europe. Spain, they've been having all the protests against mainly British tourists and stuff like that. Outside of the West, people don't really think about Britain, and when they do, they have an idealistic perception of Britain. I guess the general view in most parts of Africa of Britain is that Britain is the land of milk and honey. Yeah, they would think that. I mean, you have to realize that outside, you know, in places like Africa and in Latin America, they know very, very little about Britain. They only have little snippets from movies. Once in a blue moon, they might see something on the television, and it's always good stuff. They don't know that places like, you know, Croydon exist. They got no idea. Their perception is probably is a very antiquated perception of Britain. You know, Buckingham Palace, red telephone boxes, 4 weddings and a funeral, Hugh Grant. That's what they think Britain is. Cup of tea. That's right. The Queen, Tower Bridge. Yeah, that's their perception of it. They think it's like this really quaint, affluent, you know, horse and cart. Yeah, that's what they think Britain is. It's like a very antiquated perception of Britain. That's 100% true, Copezilla. When they hear us talk, they get shocked. So many times I've spoken to African girls in Africa, and they think I'm American. They're like, you're from the UK? I'm like, yeah. How come you've got an American accent? I'm like, I don't have an American accent. There was no American on the planet who would listen to me talking and think that they think I was American, because they expect a British person to be, you know, oh, hello, how are you doing? And all that type of, that's how they think that we all talk. They're not exposed to regional dialects and, you know, the different accents for different classes and all that type of stuff. So They never hear working class British accents at all. Yeah, spiffing day today. Good show, old fellow, and all that. Yeah, they think that's how they think that's how English people talk. Exactly. They're expecting everyone to sound like Eubank Senior. And so when they hear us talk like this, they're like, "You're not from Britain. You can't be from the UK. You're from America." That's what so many African girls have told me. Are you from America? Yeah, spiffing, jolly good show, pip pip, and all that. But there is something charming about those old posh British accents though, innit? Is it just nostalgia from watching the old movies with the posh British accent? I don't know what it is, but I do find those accents kind of charming. Well, if you've seen those reaction videos on YouTube where Americans react to different regional accents in the UK, with many of the accents, they literally can't understand what you're saying. I've seen some of those American reaction videos where somebody will talk in a Geordie accent and the two Americans will be on screen literally like, is this person talking English? They literally don't know what is being said when someone's talking with like a heavy Geordie accent or a heavy Glaswegian accent or even a Scouse accent. They're like, is this actually English? They literally don't know what is being said. Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, Jay Silver says, I actually find a posh accent on a woman quite attractive. Much prefer that to a woman speaking like a roadman. Yeah, it's preferable to a woman speaking like a roadman, but a woman with a posh accent is often condescending. In the movies and on the television, it's fine. But in real life, if you ever come across girls, women with like kind of posh accents, they're usually like real Karens and really condescending. Do you know what I mean? They've actually got horrible attitudes, a lot of them posh girls. Very condescending because they've got that classism in them, you know, where they look at you talking with a working class accent and you think you're some kind of peasant and you're not on their level, that you're some kind of like swamp creature or something. So they talk to you in a really condescending way. Yeah, classism is very much still a thing in Britain. It's just that most of us are not really exposed to it because we don't interact with posh people very often. But the upper class and the aristocracy and the wannabe aristocrats, oh, they're still very, very classist. Oh, yes, they are. But they live in their own world that we're not really exposed to. So we don't see how much they look down on us because we never move in their circles or really interact with them much. But anytime you come across them, and I can say this because I worked in luxury retail for so long, and I worked in Knightsbridge and on Sloane Street. So I was coming across these people, yeah, these toffs and all that. And yeah, their classism is very much alive and well. It's very much alive and well. But because we barely interact with them, we don't realize. Triple R says, if it ain't snowing, I ain't going. If I ever know the snow bunny, no. I've only ever slept with black women all my life. I've only ever been with black women. I've never even smashed a mixed race woman. Never even smashed a mixed race girl. Been all black girls. Ugandans are up there with my favorite African nationality because Ugandans are flipping hilarious. They are literally hilarious. The way they talk, their phrases and sayings, their mentality, everything about Ugandans is just funny, like unintentionally funny. Ugandans are literally hilarious. It's not just Pastor Semper and Simon Kagwangala. No. Ugandans across the board tend to be just damn funny, in my experience, and I've known many of them. They're just funny people. In fact, let's put Pastor Semper back on the screen. There you go, Semper. Well, that's Simon with Pepe Julian Onzima. Simon's face cracks me up. And this is Semper wilding out. Look at Semper. Man's wilding out. At this point, he's saying, this excretory system is not designed to receive. It's only for exit. It is not designed to receive. Should I call you Mister? Yeah, their temperament is jokes. You got the Ugandan temperament, everything about me is just funny. Because I was dating a Ugandan girl for several years and I was always around her family and friends and all that. And I was just rolling all the time. That's just mad funny without even trying. Should I call you Mister? Max says, I'm thinking you live in Kenya. No, I don't live in Kenya. I wouldn't live in Kenya. Kenya is, it's developed and all that, but nah, it's too westernized for me. Too westernized. All right, peeps, been streaming for nearly 4 hours. Am I going for a record here? So we're going to shut this one down. D-Man says Nairobi is a great city. Yeah, I'm sure it's got many good things there, but I also think about the culture, not just the things to do and infrastructure, because Nairobi is one of the top cities in Africa in terms of infrastructure and things to do. It's not as developed as like maybe Durban, Cape Town, South African cities, but it's not too far off. But yeah, the westernization there is a bit much for me. But yeah, gonna shut this one down. Shout out to everybody who participated in the conversation. Friday night hangout. You know how we do. The night flight. So yeah, special shout out to those who donated via super chat, particularly Matt and Funny Faces, who's got the bag. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.